Hello and welcome to Hockey Talk. My name is Jaret Schneider along with Matt Durnan, and we've wrapped up the NHL season now. We're moving in towards the playoffs, and we'll go over some of those things coming up, including some of the matchups. We've got some 1 seeds versus some 8 seeds, some teams who just kind of slid their way in at the last minute, including the last game. Some of the matchups came down to the last game as well, so we'll go over that in a little bit. But first, I got to kind of get your opinion on the overall season, how it went. Were you excited? The 48 games, did it make a little bit of a difference? Was it kind of what you expected or anything like that?
Not so much what I expected. It flew by. I thought really quick season. 48 games you'd think be a little bit longer, but really there was no days off. You don't have the All-Star break like you usually do, so there was games every night. A lot faster than usual, so it did kind of come up on you out of nowhere. And it was also weird having the NBA playoffs start before, which is kind of out of the ordinary. So it felt like it dragged on for that last week almost, where like you and I were saying, let's get it over with. Let's get to the playoffs already. But we're finally here. So. Special announcement for Mr. Schneider. I don't know if you caught what he's wearing. He's pretty excited right now because of...
It was a big day yesterday, the NHL draft lottery. It wasn't a huge surprise. They were the 2, but they moved up to the 1. So it was pretty good. I think it was, a 18.8% chance or something. So that's kind of cool. Moving up, maybe get Seth Jones, hopefully something like that, but we'll see. So then I guess moving into some of the matchups now we have, if we go over them, we've got Chicago and Minnesota in the West is the 1 and 8. The 2 and the 7 is Anaheim and Detroit. The 3-6 is Vancouver, San Jose. 4-5 is LA and St. Louis, and then East. What do we have in the East? I know your Leafs are in there. They moved their way in.
Finally, the Leafs made the playoffs. It's a big year for me. 9 years, long wait, but they're playing Boston, which
that's
I'm not too sure about right now. You've been original 6 matchup. It'll be a good series, I think. A little bit better than people might be predicting right now. Pittsburgh, New York, another division rival game. Washington plays against the Rangers. That's a 3-6 matchup. And then, as we already mentioned, Toronto and Boston. And then you have Ottawa and Montreal, another division matchup. So, a few interesting matchups in the East, which is nice to see. A couple in the West. I mean, I'm a little bit more intrigued about the West. Series that I'm looking at that I think are going to be really interesting is Detroit and Anaheim. You've got the 7 and the 2. But Detroit came on really strong late.
Yeah.
Anaheim, strong to start out of the gate, and a little bit faltered down the stretch just a little bit. And I think Detroit's coming in hot, and I think that's going to be a tough matchup. Same, I think, might be surprising. You see a 3-6 in the West with San Jose and Vancouver. San Jose, I think, only finished 2 points less than Vancouver. Vancouver got that 3 seed because of winning the division. And San Jose did sweep that season series against Vancouver, so I think that's an interesting series to watch out for.
So yeah, maybe I'll go back to Detroit and Anaheim for a sec. That was definitely the one that I had been looking at too. I mean, I'd been talking to some of my buddies from back home today, and I had mentioned, Detroit, they could upset them easy, but all my buddies are convinced, no, Anaheim's going to walk the floor with them, so we'll see. And then the other one that kind of intrigues me a little bit is the LA and St. Louis matchup, rather.
Okay.
It is the 4-5, but I'm kind of heavy into LA. I picked them at the beginning of the year to make it through the West, and they did slip down to only the 4 seed, but we'll see as things move forward. I know that's one that I want to really pay attention to and kind of focus on because St. Louis, I mean, they were pretty good in the playoffs last year. LA did sweep them in the playoffs last year, and I think it was the second round. But St. Louis had a good first round. They had a good season. They were, top up there. They were right up there the whole year. The defense was picking up for them last year. This year they've kind of slipped down a little bit. But I don't know. That's one I want to look out for. And then maybe staying in the West again, we have Chicago and Minnesota. I mean, Minnesota, they've kind of been around this year. They were kind of up and down. They were sitting at about the 6 seed for the most part, 5-6. They've kind of dropped down towards the end, losing a couple of games, and then we're a couple of games ahead. So we'll see that one. That one, I don't know if there's much of a chance for an upset in that one.
For the money that Minnesota spent, I think 8 is kind of disappointed for them. I think they were right there up until about, I would say, mid-March. They were right there for the division lead with Vancouver, and even were in third at one point. And then Vancouver started to get their game together, started to get on a little bit of a hot streak, and Minnesota really faded. And you saw them drop from third down to 5th, down to 6th, down to 7th, and just kind of steady. We're losing games. Healy got injured, and that was it for them. They can't really do it without Heater out there. But
Palmenville's out now too.
I don't think anyone's really given them much of a chance. Probably a little bit better team. They could be another, kind of case of what LA did last year, where they are a little bit better than I think their standing says in the standings. I think they're a little better than an 8 seed. But realistically, I think Chicago's just too deep. We'll get to those picks later to kind of I don't want to give too much away and predict anything too much now. But we're just trying to talk about series that might be a little bit interesting. Another one that I think will be good is Pittsburgh against New York Islanders. That's a 1 versus 8. And I guess 90% of people aren't giving the Islanders much of a chance in this one. But you saw this year the Islanders did blow the Penguins out in one game, and I think they even beat them twice this year. I could be wrong on that. But, the Islanders have that one strong young kid line, all the Toronto boys, Tavares, Matt Molson, and Brad Boyes, who've been lights out this year.
they really
you
picked
could,
up
you
towards
could make
the
an
end,
argument for Tavares for the Hart Trophy this year. He was right up there in the Art Ross race, and you saw Pittsburgh last year. They couldn't keep the puck out of their net, so it'll be interesting to see whether Fleury can kind of find his game and actually keep them in games rather than have his team go out there, score 6 goals, and lose a 7-6 game like they did last year against Philadelphia.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned Pittsburgh. I mean, I don't think Fleury has to necessarily steal a game, but he has to make sure that he doesn't lose it for Pittsburgh because, I mean, the Islanders are going to be there. They're going to score. They might score 3-4 goals a game.
They've got a high-powered offense.
Pittsburgh has the offense, too, to get them there, but, I mean, the Fleury, as long as Fleury doesn't have any bad games where he gives up 6 or 7 or even an 8 spot or anything like that, Pittsburgh, I think, should be all right in the series. I mean, as you mentioned, the Islanders really only have that one line. I mean, they're all right. I mean, they really picked up towards the end. They won. I can't tell you specifically how many games they won towards the end, but
a lot.
They really picked it up and they really moved themselves into the playoffs because I believe they were sitting out at some point. And then as far as, I guess that's the 1 and the 8, maybe moving down into the 2 and the 7, it is Montreal-Ottawa. Montreal did win the division, so they were maybe not necessarily supposed to win the division because Boston, I think they dropped their last 2 games to
Washington, and then they lost to Ottawa on the last day.
So they ended up moving into the 4 seed.
A lot of matchup changes on that last day.
Yeah.
There were a lot of potential situations. It's not very often you see that where one game can influence a matchup. I mean, I think Ottawa could have played 3 different teams. Toronto was between Boston and Montreal, and then Montreal could have played either Toronto or Ottawa, and I believe it could have even been someone else. I could be wrong, but the Ottawa-Boston game had a lot of repercussions involved with it, and I'm not going to be a conspiracy theorist, but I think Boston was kind of comfortable playing the Leafs in the first round and weren't too concerned with losing. I mean, you ideally want to have a 2 seed and kind of guarantee yourself that first and second round possible home ice advantage. But again, you can't really put the cart before the horse and think, okay, we want second round because you have to win your first round to get to the second round. And history shows Boston's pretty much had a stranglehold on Toronto. They've lost once in the last 10 matchups, so I don't think they were too concerned if they had lost that game, whereas Ottawa was saying, we get a chance to move up, we get to play Montreal rather than play Pittsburgh. I mean, no one really wants to play Pittsburgh, so I think Ottawa had a lot more to lose / gain in that game, whereas Boston says, okay, we either finish 7th or 2nd and we play the 7th seed, who would have been the Islanders, would have been 7th, who I don't think Boston's got a problem playing, or they play the Leafs, who, either or, I don't think Boston, it's kind of win-win, they don't really care who they play at that point, whereas Ottawa wants a more favorable matchup, whereas it's division rival Montreal. They know a little bit more about them. Montreal's kind of had some struggles. Carey Price has been a little bit off, so I don't think they're a really scary matchup for a 7 seed. So
yeah, and moving into that matchup, I don't think that's. I mean, Montreal's been a good team. Obviously, they've gotten the 2 seed, but I think that's a pretty good matchup. I think actually for Ottawa, in their sake. I mean, instead of playing Pittsburgh or Boston, I think they would rather play Montreal, and that's why maybe they did pick up towards the end there and won that last game because. I mean, playing Montreal, Montreal's a good team. They're a deep team. They've got some skill. They deserve to be the 2 seed. They were there all year, except maybe towards the end. Some people might disagree. But, I mean, Montreal was there all year. I mean, they deserve the division. We'll see in that series, what happens. I think, Ottawa could upset them, actually. I mean, Ottawa, they're back. Carlson's back. We'll see as they move forward into that one. I mean, maybe moving into some other series now. I know Washington is playing the Rangers. That's the 3-6. That's another tough one, too, because of the way Washington picked it up towards the end. Washington is actually the 3 and the Rangers are the 6, but I think they were pretty close in points actually. So I don't know. That's a tough one too. The Rangers could very well upset the Capitals if you consider that an upset. But I mean,
I don't know if you can even really consider that an upset. I mean, the Southeast Division winner was always going to be a pretty favorable matchup for a 6 seed when you consider that for the most part you were either in 9th or you were in 3rd. Yeah. So realistically you're playing a team that kind of hovered around that 8-9 seed most of the year and then got up just because they won their division. So I don't think that's really, you can consider either team a favorite. Washington has home ice, so you got to, I guess, give them a little bit of the edge. But I don't think that New York is too concerned with it. And I think this is a really interesting series because, the Rangers did need to win out to get in because Winnipeg was winning games and the Islanders were winning games and Ottawa was winning games. I mean, down the stretch, New York had to play some pretty good hockey. They had to win out. They didn't have to depend on anybody else to lose to get in. They won their games and they got in on their own power. And Washington was the hottest team for the last month. So you got a couple of teams that have been kind of rolling, coming in matched up. I think that could be a pretty interesting series as well.
And then maybe we'll hit in the last matchup here a little bit before we take a break is Boston-Toronto. I mean, Toronto's your team. It is the 4-5. We talked a little bit about them already, but I mean, it's a tough series. And lots of people are predicting Boston to win in 5 or 6 games, which could be tough for the Leafs. But I mean, they're there too, right? I mean, they do have to go into Boston for the first 2 games, but we'll see how Kessel, the one matchup they're really talking about is Kessel and Chara, up and down the wing and up and down the side, and see what the Leafs can do defensively in their own zone as well as clearing rebounds out and keeping stuff off of Reimer, because that's the Bruins are the second most amount of shots in the league this year, so they are shooting the puck lots.
Toronto's been having a hard time keeping shots off their goal. I mean, you saw the other night when they beat, Ottawa, and they gave up 50 shots. So, yeah, you're right. They're going to have to limit shots. Tough matchup. You know, Toronto hasn't matched up well against Boston. Played well against them this year. I know I won't take anything away. They lost 3 of 4 games, but they did have a back-to-back where they took 3 of a possible 4 points against them, where they won the home and home. They won the first end of the home and home, and then they lost in a shootout. And Toronto lost to everybody in a shootout, so that really doesn't matter. There's no shootouts in overtime, so that game, could go either way if you go into a long overtime game. And didn't really get blown out. They lost 1-0 in the first game. They played them, close game, a lot better than what it was last year when they were losing games, 8-9-1, and it was absolutely ridiculous, and they looked like they didn't have any fight in them. So, a little bit more character, a little more fight. And Boston's been pretty uninspiring the last couple of weeks. They didn't exactly race into the playoffs. They kind of limped in more so than on the good side of things. So it'll be interesting. And Toronto hasn't played well really either. So, I'll watch the series, but as far as viewership goes, I don't think that's really too exciting of a series because neither team has really played that well.
So we'll get into that as well as we move forward into some picks towards the end, and we'll also go over some players to watch this series moving forward up to the Conn Smythe. But we'll take a quick break. You're watching Hockey Talk right here on Shaw TV. Hello and welcome back to Hockey Talk. My name is Jaret Schneider along with Matt Durnan, and playoff matchups, kind of went over those. Fantasy pools are a big thing. They're a big thing in the regular season.
Pools,
I like them way more in the playoffs just because teams get eliminated and you have to pick the teams that are going to move on.
It's interesting, yeah.
So I like that. That's my thinking on those. We'll go into some of the players. Maybe I'll ask you, what are some players to watch for? Obviously, when picking a fantasy team in the playoffs, you want to pick the good players from the teams who are going to go to the finals.
Ideally, yeah. You want to look to it depends. There's different formats. There's some pools where you can pick different players every round, but for the most part, it is you kind of want to try to stick with guys. If you are doing an open draft format, which is the ones that I'm usually in, where every player is available to everyone. It's not it's not an actual like fantasy draft where one person picks one guy and then you go down and everyone picks different players from different teams. But in an open draft format, yeah, you want to ideally stockpile as much as you can with guys from the teams that you project to kind of go deep. So a lot of people this year, from what I've seen in pools that I've looked at or been in, a lot of people stocking up with guys like Taves, Kane, Hossa, Crosby, Malkin, Neal, Kunitz. They're going with those Pittsburgh and Chicago guys, which it is. It's the smart money. It's the your odds are pretty good going with those guys. But if you look last year, like we saw, what was an 8 seed and a 6 seed in the finals. So
I didn't have anyone in the finals last year. So I didn't pick anyone from those teams, right?
It's the guy that kind of goes out there and makes those picks that no one else really has. I think that's going to be the ones that win. You could see 1-1, the 2 1 seeds go in the final, but I would say definitely if you're looking at round to round, look at guys like Crosby, Malkin, Neal, because I think that's going to be a high scoring series. Even if you can look at guys like John Tavares and Matt Molson.
Yeah, if you're just picking one series, might as well.
Go with those guys that are going to be in those high scoring series. Fleury hasn't really shown too much. He does have a cup ring, but he hasn't shown much in recent year. That he can keep the puck out of his net. Another series, Chicago-Minnesota is very tempting, but I think that Minnesota is kind of, they're stingy defensively, and I don't think that's going to be very high scoring. So, I think the people that pick the Chicago players and really go heavy on that are going to be a little bit frustrated early because I don't see Chicago really. I don't see Chicago blowing Minnesota out, 5-0, 5-1 in games and really stack. I'm seeing a lot of 2-1, maybe 3-2 games, and I don't think those guys are going to be racking up points until they maybe get a matchup against a team that's a little bit less stingy defensively. Even though they are an 8 seed, I think that it's going to be tight checking, and it is playoffs, so every team plays a little bit more hard defensively. I think the East is where the scoring is going to be this year for the first round at least. Washington, New York, you can see a lot of scoring. New York, Lundqvist has been pretty solid, but I think Ovechkin and Backstrom have been almost unstoppable in the last couple of weeks. Montreal, Ottawa, avoid it altogether. Ottawa plays very tight checking, very boring. Montreal doesn't really have a lot of guys that light up the score sheet. Ottawa doesn't really have anyone either that's a true purebred. You might go with Carlson if you think that I was going to make a deep run, if you need a defenseman. I don't know. Who are you looking at for your picks?
Well, obviously we mentioned the top teams, Chicago and Pittsburgh. Like if you are picking one where you just pick and go all the way deep, I like the Chicago guys, obviously Kane and Taves. You mentioned defensively. They might not do it in the first seriously. You might get a little bit frustrated early on, but if they do make it to a second and third round, those are all going to add up. But I mean, they're going to be there towards the end. If you make it to the Cup final, they're going to be the top scorers anyway. You see it every year. You look back on past years, the two teams in the Cup final always have the leading scorers. It's the way it goes. It's
more games played,
so,
more chance for points.
So you want to pick the players from the teams, obviously, that are going to move forward. So some of the other players that I like, I mean, you see Vancouver. I don't know if I'm not too sure on them. I didn't pick anyone from Vancouver because I think San Jose could upset them, and I did the same thing. I didn't pick anyone from San Jose because
it's hard to call
that series could go either way, and you don't want to lose out real bad first. I kind of went into LA this year actually because, I mean, some of my buddies I know were saying, oh, St. Louis, it's St. Louis's year this year. I don't know. I said that last year, and I kind of back off now. So I'm thinking, LA, I'm pretty sure LA is going to get through the first round. So, and I like them again. I mean, look what they did in the playoffs last year. They absolutely dominated teams. They only lost one home game, I think, throughout the whole playoffs. So I like players from LA. Definitely Carter. I mean, he was a huge goal scorer throughout the year. He was right behind Ovi in the goal scoring. So if goals count as 2, Carter's definitely one guy I look for.
If you're in a pool where goals are higher value, you want to definitely look at those guys like Carter, Ovechkin. Who else really? I mean, Crosby puts up points, but he's not going to score a lot of goals. Maybe Kunitz, because Kunitz doesn't get a lot of Crosby's kind of scraps, right? So.
Yeah. So, and then staying with LA, I know Kopitar is another guy. He doesn't score a whole lot. I think he had 14 goals, but he had 30-some assists. So, I mean, that's 40-some points right there. And then moving over towards the East, I mean, like we mentioned, some D. Kind of avoid the Montreal-Ottawa series. But if you need D-man, Subban or Carlson, I mean, they might even, one of them's going to make it to the second round too, right? So
yeah, that's true.
Through defensive point, because sometimes
it's
defensive
kind of a dice
scoring,
where you pick one or the other, or do you pick both, and then kind of say, I'll part with one to have, a guy who could potentially be the leading defensive scorer. Because really, who else do you have as far as defensemen go?
Well, I mean, it's tough for defense.
Letang in Pittsburgh.
Letang, you got Doughty if LA does anything. I mean, he didn't do anything throughout the regular season.
No, not really.
One of the wild horses maybe for me is actually a good cousin of mine over in Toronto. If the Leafs do anything,
if the Leafs do anything, yeah.
Cody Franson led the Leafs in scoring from defense. He was also the fourth.
30-something points.
Yeah, he was the 4th overall scorer
kind of
from
a surprise pick
the
there,
Leafs.
yeah.
So I liked him, not bad. Chicago, obviously, Keith
Depends.
and Seabrook.
Boston plays stingy, and Toronto's never really been able to put a lot of goals in on them, so he could be.
Oh, they got to win a series. They don't win the series.
If they win the series, you're laughing. At that point, you're the only one that's going to have him. He's going to put up numbers. A guy that I like that I picked, I'll let you in a little secret here. I got a little bit of a feeling that San Jose might be a dark horse. They might be able to kind of pull a little bit of what LA did, kind of jump up and surprise some teams, and I think that was what a lot of what LA had on their side last year was as an 8th seed. Yeah. And they did come in so hot and rolling, and I think they kind of surprised a lot of teams. Teams are going to be ready for LA this year. Not saying that they won't, have success, but I think teams are going to be a little bit more ready. They know that they're Cup champs. Teams are going to be up to play against them this year, as opposed to where LA was kind of coming in, caught everyone a little bit off guard, and were able to just kind of steamroll everybody. But I think San Jose has kind of been laying in the weeds. You saw when they started the season, I mean, they came out, they were the hottest team. They went 7 games in a row
without 8 goals
without a loss. I mean, and if those guys can heat up again, they could really surprise some teams. So, a guy like Couture could be a good pick. I mean, getting past Vancouver is going to be the first big step, but I think if they can get by Vancouver and they can get rolling, they'll be a tough team to beat. And Niemi was arguably one of the better goalies in the NHL, if not the best in the NHL this year. He kept San Jose in a lot of games this year. And another guy like started the season hot, kind of slowed down, but a lot of playoff experience and proven offensive defenseman is Dan Boyle in San Jose. I like what he brings. If you're looking for a West, there's not a lot of defensemen out West really, apart from Duncan Keith, who everyone's picking. But if you want a kind of a sleeper dark horse guy, I think Dan Boyle's a good guy that you can kind of look at for that.
Yeah, Dan Boyle, he's put up those points in the past, right? I mean, you look at that series, and San Jose, they did come in. I mean, they were up and down throughout the year, right? I mean, they started off so hot. They had a huge stretch in the middle where they dropped from second. They were right with Anaheim, all the way down to like 8th, I believe. Now they're back up to 6th again. So we'll see. They could be that dark horse.
We're even fighting could have been as high as 4th. That game for LA and them could have been.
Yeah, that's right.
But St. Louis won out and kind of spoiled that for them. So they could have been as high as 4th, 6th. That 4 through 6 in the West is pretty much tight. Everyone's pretty much dead even, I would say.
Yeah, San Jose for me, I kind of look at, I look at some of their past in the playoffs. Obviously, they haven't got it done. They haven't got to the finals. I mean, they've won their first.
Get over that hump.
I think they've won the first round series the past couple of years in a row. They've made it to the second or third round, so they still rack up a good amount of points. But as far as getting into the Cup final, and maybe this is the challenge they need. Maybe they need to be that 6th seed because you look at it every year.
Come in as an underdog and not have the big expectations, right?
They always win the division, so they get through the first round, but then they come up across a team like Detroit or Vancouver or something in the second round, or in LA, and they lose out. So we'll see this year as being a 6th seed. Maybe they can do something. I mean, look at some of the players on their team, like we mentioned, Thornton and Couture. Obviously, they're going to score goals. They lost Clough, who was one of their goal scorers, not so much this year, but he was in the past. Marlowe picked up 8. early on here, but I don't know. Maybe moving over to the East. What other matchups in the East do you like for as far as some goal scorers and some fantasy?
Again, it's hard to go away from Pittsburgh and New York. Again, if you're looking long term, stick with Pittsburgh. They're never a bad bet. I mean, they're so deep and they've got so many guys that can score. You can look at even guys like if you're in a big league where you're looking at maybe like a roster of like 20 or so players. You look at guys like a Ginla, even James Neal,
Morrow,
Pascal Dupuis, Morrow, guys that are a little bit deeper down the depth chart. If you're going round to round, I would stick entirely in that series.
Yeah.
If you're going, you can make new picks every round. I would stick almost entirely with Pittsburgh and New York guys. They're going to be probably the highest scoring series. Pittsburgh's shown that they like to play run and gun hockey with everybody. Almost everything else, Washington and New York could be high scoring. It kind of depends on what Lundqvist does. I think that Washington's kind of right for the picking. Holtby is not very proven. Had a decent run last year in the playoffs, so he could do it again. He got Washington over the hump, beat Boston last year as a pretty unproven goaltender. So we'll see if he can do that again this year. But no, there's not a lot of scoring to be had. If there's any scoring, I hate to say it, it could be Boston. If you go with a guy like maybe Sagan, Marchand, Bergeron, I could see. You said earlier that Toronto's been giving up a lot of shots. Boston's been rattling off a lot of shots. And if Reimer has an off night, you could see 5-6 goals poured in where those guys put up 2, 3, 4 points a night. And they could be guys that could really light it up for you in the first round. Who knows if they do it later on. Boston's been having some trouble finding the net lately. But, I mean, if there is a team that they could do it against, it's Toronto, as they've shown in the past that they've been able to kind of own them and had their numbers. So. Yeah,
and then some of the defense on that team, too. I mean, Char could get some points. Some things like that. So there's another defenseman for you. Maybe we'll see. I mean, other than that, Hubble picks, though, I mean, we'll go into some of that. I mean, the regular season's all wrapped up. We're pretty dead even. Maybe we'll get to that in just a second, though. We'll get to some of the picks and some things like that. But we'll take a quick break. You're watching Hockey Talk right here on Shaw TV. My name is Jaret Schneider along with Matt Durnan. We mentioned some picks before we went away, so I'll let you recap them. We've done the whole season now, so we got a total and we got a winner.
You're the winner. Close. It literally could not have been any closer. You finished up 49-43. I finished up 48-44.
I had two terrible weeks at the end, I think.
I'll cheers you on that one. Good job. Both above 500, so not bad. I mean,
I think I went
respectable.
I think I went 1-5 each of the last 2 weeks. Or
I had a rough start. You came out of the gate. We both kind of went through ebbs and flows, but good season, good series. We'll get to the playoffs. So the way we're going to do this for the playoffs is we're each going to pick each series and number of games. So we're going to take the winner and the number of games. So if we both pick the winner and then whoever picks a different,
that's going to be the tiebreaker.
We'll be the tiebreaker either way. So there's 2 points to be had in every series, right? So if you pick the winner right, you get 1 point. If you get the games right, you get that one right.
So if neither of us get the game, it's just 1 point, right?
Yeah. So let's start out west, Chicago, Minnesota.
Yeah, we'll start with the 1-8. I got to go with Chicago. I mean, just on the fact that they're Chicago, the number 1 seed. I like what they're doing. I like their defensively. They've stepped up compared to the last year. So I'm going to go Chicago over Minnesota in 5.
5? Okay, I'm going to go Chicago as well. I think a little too much firepower. Just to make it interesting, I'll go with 6.
Okay,
I think Minnesota might be able to get in there and
they
steal a
could.
couple.
They very well could. I mean, they got some home games in there, too. I mean, game 3 and 4, so we'll see. Moving down into the 2, we got Anaheim and Detroit.
Yep.
So I like Detroit. I mean, I've always liked Detroit coming down. I mean, I'm going to take Detroit. Okay. I'm going to go on a whim. I'm going to take Detroit in this series just because of the way they've been playing. I mean, there is no Lidstrom. But the way they've picked up towards the end, they've got a Datsuk, they've got a Zetterberg. I mean, Anaheim's got some firepower as well. But I'm going to take Detroit, and I'm going to take it in 7.
Detroit in 7, he says. Okay, I'll go with Anaheim.
Anaheim, the number 2 seed.
I'll go with Anaheim to get it done, but I'll say 7 as well. I think this could be a long series. I don't think either team's really going to run away with it. But Anaheim's home ice in the end will be the difference maker. And
then moving down into the 3-6, I mean, this one
Vancouver,
was
San Jose.
This one was very close by points, right? They were only 2 points off difference between the two of them. So this is a tough one for me as well. I got to take Vancouver though, just on the fact they got the home ice. They got the first 2 games. They very well could split the 2 and then lose home ice to San Jose. But I'm going to take Vancouver in this one. This could be a long series as well. So I'm going to say 7 again, just on the fact that they're so close and they're very even teams. It's a very even matchup.
Okay, I'm just going to go based entirely on the season series. They played 3 times in the season. San Jose won all 3. So I just think that Vancouver doesn't really match up very well against the way that San Jose plays. Vancouver's best player are twin sisters. San Jose is pretty big and physical. They beat them up a lot. And Vancouver hasn't been able to get any goaltending lately. So San Jose, and I'm going to go with San Jose in 6.
Yeah, and I believe it is Luong who's going to end up starting here because Schneider's still hurt.
Really?
So we'll see that as well, yeah. So that could make a little bit of a difference,
And
too.
he gave up 7 his last time out, so they could get behind the 8 ball pretty quick here. St. Louis, LA, 4-5 in the West. What do you
Well,
think?
I got to take LA in this one. I picked LA
Yep.
from the beginning of the year, so I've got to ride LA again. I'm going to ride them all the way up. LA over St. Louis in 5. I'm gonna go low. I mean, that who knows, but I go for 5.
I'll go with LA as well. I think LA in 6, though. I think St. Louis is stingy. They're tough to play.
Very tough.
And Brian Elliott's been pretty solid in net, and they're tough to break down. So I think they can steal a few with goaltending. Let's go over to the East. Pittsburgh Islanders. What do you think?
Pittsburgh. I mean, the number 1 seed, the number 1 overall. Well, not overall seed. I guess Chicago was, but I got to take Pittsburgh in this one over the Islanders. I'm going to go in 5 games. I'm going to go another quick series, but the Islanders very well could steal some games, especially on home ice. Tavares could come out. I mean, as long as they can stop Pittsburgh defensively, they've got the high-powered offense. They've got the power play to get some games done, but I got to go with Pittsburgh in this one just based on the overall roster.
Okay. I'm going to go Pittsburgh as well, obviously. Better team, built for the playoffs. They've been there every year since Crosby's come in pretty much. So with him getting healthy, I think he's going to start the series. I think he's going to play.
He should be, yeah. He was talking today. They play tomorrow, I think, right? So.
Yeah, they play tomorrow. I'm going to go with a sweep. I'll say Pittsburgh in 4. I don't think Islanders. I think it'll be high scoring, but I think that Pittsburgh's just got too much firepower that they'll just overwhelm them. Montreal, Ottawa.
This is another tough one. I mean, Ottawa really picked up towards the end, but I'm going to take Montreal just on the fact they've got the home ice. They were the 2 seed. Ottawa doesn't really have anything to lose playing Montreal. I mean, their back's against the wall. They're there. They're out there. But I'm going to take Montreal in this series in a matter of 6 games, just on the fact that, I mean, Carey Price played all right. I think he picks up towards the end. I think Gallagher and Galchenyuk, they are rookies, but I think they're going to pick it up here in the playoffs. We'll see some action out of them, and I think it's just too tough for Ottawa. I mean, they're missing Spezza. They've got Carlson back. They've got some other key players. They picked up Conacher, but I still got to take Montreal in this one.
Okay, I am going to go off the board like I did earlier in the year by picking Montreal to finish as the second-ranked Canadian team, and they actually did finish as a first-ranked Canadian team. So, but Ottawa kind of caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting it. They're stingy defensively, and Craig Anderson was lights out in the start of the season. It was pretty much the reason that they were able to hold off and stay where they are. So I'm going to go Ottawa in 7 games.
Okay, so another 7-game series. So then moving forward down, what do we have next?
We have Washington and the Rangers.
Well, this one I'm going to go, I don't know if it's necessarily an upset, but I'm going to take the Rangers in this one. I think they're just too high-powered offensively. I mean, they did trade Gaborik away, but they picked up Ryan Clough, a big physical guy. So I'm going to take the Rangers just on the matter of it's all on Ovi, and the Rangers, they're balanced. I mean, I just got to take the Rangers in this one a matter of 5 games. Washington could steal one, but other than that, I think the Rangers could just knock this one right out of the park.
Suck it up to Mayor Tim on that one.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with Washington. I'm just based on momentum. You saw what it did for LA last year. LA came into the playoffs, firing hot. They had to play playoff hockey all the way to get in. Washington basically did the same thing, came in.
They're 12-1-1 in the last 14 games.
They're the hottest team coming into the playoffs, and I think that they maybe not make a deep run. I think they might run out of steam late, but I think they've still got enough momentum to carry them through, and I'm going to say Washington in 6.
Yeah, well, if Washington does get the win, they get to play Montreal in the second round, so who knows, right?
If Montreal
Pittsburgh wins and Montreal wins, right?
It's all up in the air
Based on the
now.
normal seeding, they would run into Montreal in the second round because they were the 3. But anyway, we'll go into
Last
the next one
not least, my Toronto Maple Leafs against the Boston Bruins.
Well, this is a tough one for me. I mean, we've watched a lot of Leaf games all year, but I'm going to take Boston this one. I think they're too much of a team. They're too high-powered. They were kind of there all year. They did fall off towards the end, and if you do go on momentum, it would be the Leafs more so necessarily. They did lose a couple of games as well, but Boston just really slouched. But I'm going to take Boston this one. Horton has been skating, not necessarily saying he's going to be back or he's going to do a whole lot, but Horton will be back. They've got some other guys. They've got Tuukka Rask in the cage, and they're just too physical, too defensive, and as we mentioned, they get shot. So I'm going to go with Boston in 6 games.
I mean, as much as it pains me to say, I think Boston is going to win this series. Number of games is kind of a toss-up, I would say. Our cameraman's laughing. He's a Jets fan. Let's just see what the Jets matchup is for the first round. Who are they playing? Golf. Okay. So, no, but Boston, reality, I mean, as good as Boston has been against the Leafs, I think it's going to come down to more so the fact that Boston is just battle-tested. They've been through it. They were Cup champion. They've been in the playoffs. The Leafs, a lot of young guys that got them there, but they don't have that playoff experience. They've got, I think, maybe 5 games of playoff experience in them. Who's played a single playoff game for that team? I mean, their leaders are Kessel, Nazem Kadri's never seen a playoff game. James Van Riemsdyk saw a little bit of playoff hockey with Philly. And, I mean, he might even... Cody Franson played a little bit of playoff hockey with Nashville.
4 games
but, yeah, they don't have a lot of experience. James Reimer's never seen a single playoff game in the NHL in his life. So I just think they're going to be a little bit too overwhelmed. It's a lot. It's a big stage. And I think it's going to be Boston in 6 as well. I'll agree with you there.
So I guess that pretty much wraps up picks. I mean, is there anything else maybe before we get this thing done? I mean, we'll move forward. This is the first round show.
Yeah, we do. Are we going to pick this up at the end of the first round, or are we going to kind of maybe give a mid-round update?
Whenever. We'll do a mid-round update or something like that. We'll come back at some point, I'm sure. So other than that, it pretty much wraps it up. For Jaret Schneider and Matt Durnan, thanks for watching.